Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we've got this stack of sources you've shared, articles, notes, all sorts of research.
Hmm.
And we're going to unpack the incredible story of Major League Baseball.
It's quite a story.
Right. Our mission, basically, is to pull out the key moments, the big changes that reshaped the game. Kind of like watching a time lapse, See how it got from, well, the start to what it is today.
It really is a fascinating journey
Mm.
because the game you watch now, it seems so set, right?
Hmm.
With all the rules and the strategies.
Yeah, totally.
But it wasn't, born that way. It was built up piece by piece over, gosh, more than a century.
Exactly. So let's go way back, like the 1800s. Baseball wasn't really this organized thing then.
Not at all.
It was more like people getting together in a field, maybe,
Well,
making up rules as they went.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Using whatever they had.
Yeah.
And we actually have some clues, some early mentions of games like baseball.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, there's a diary entry from a student back in 1786 talking about playing baseball.
Baseball.
Yeah. And even earlier, 1791, a town in Massachusetts actually made a rule. Said you couldn't play baseball too close to the meeting house windows.
Huh. Worried about broken glass.
Must have been. It tells you people were playing at kids probably, enough to be a nuisance sometimes.
That makes sense. And then people started forming actual clubs, right? Like dedicated groups.
Exactly. Like the Olympic Baseball Club in Philadelphia. That was way back, 1833. So groups forming just to play this game.
But the rules were still kind of all over the place.
Oh, definitely. Imagine trying to play a game with your friends today, but everyone learned slightly different rules depending on where they lived.
That sounds messy. Like, how did they even decide who was out?
Well, that's a great example.
Yeah.
In some places, you might have had to tag the runner. In others, you could actually hit the runner with the ball. They called it soaking.
Wait, hit them with the ball? Like dodgeball or kickball?
Sort of, yeah. You
Hmm.
can see how that would be different.
Chaotic. So how do they get everyone playing the same game? That seems like a huge step.
It was. And that's where the New York Knickerbockers really come into the picture. They formed in 1845.
The Knickerbockers, right. I've heard of them.
They realized, we need a standard set of rules if we're going to play this properly. And their rules caught on pretty quickly.
What were the big changes they made? Was it just small stuff?
No, some were pretty fundamental. The biggest one, like we mentioned, no more soaking. You couldn't hit the runner with the ball anymore.
Okay, that's huge. You had to physically tag them.
Tag him or force him out at a base.
Yeah.
Big difference.
What else?
They also brought in things like defined base paths and foul lines.
Wait, before that, you could just run anywhere after hitting it.
Apparently, in some versions, it sounds kind of wild, doesn't it?
Totally wild. So these rules, they seem simple, but they really changed the whole point of the game, didn't they?
Absolutely. It shifted the focus. It became less about just chasing runners down and more about the pitcher trying to outwit the batter and the batter trying to make good, clean contact within those foul lines.
So more skill, less chasing.
You could put it that way, yeah. More strategy involved. It's amazing how just a few key rules can reshape everything.
Did they play using these rules right away?
They did. There was a game in 1846, considered one of the first under these more modern rules.
Hmm.
Funny thing is, the Knickerbockers, the rule makers, they got absolutely crushed in that game.
That's ironic. Okay, so the game starts to get organized. It's amateur, though, right? People playing for fun.
Initially, yes, purely amateur. But as it got more popular, more clubs popped up, they needed even more standardization across different clubs.
So, like a governing body.
Exactly. In 1857, they formed the National Association of Baseball Players, the NABPP.
NABBP. Okay.
And they really started cementing the rules we recognize today.
Mhm.
Things like 90 feet between bases, 9 players on a team, 9 innings for a game.
The real foundations.
And the sources mention something interesting here. The Civil War actually helped spread these rules.
How so?
Soldiers from different places would play the game together in camps, using these more standardized NABBP rules. When they went home, they took those rules with them. It helped create a more unified version of baseball across the country.
That's fascinating, a sort of unintentional consequence of the war.
Right. But then, as players got better, money starts creeping in.
Ah, yes. The classic story.
Some players were getting paid under the table, maybe getting a share of the ticket sales that wasn't quite fair, wasn't really open.
So they had to make a decision.
Yeah. To sort of clean things up and make it legitimate, they decided in 1869 to officially allow professional teams that could openly pay their players.
And who was the first?
The Cincinnati Red Stockings, 1869. They were the first openly all-professional team.
And were they any good?
They were amazing. They went undefeated that first season, toured the country, They were a sensation.
Wow. So they basically proved this whole pro baseball idea could work.
Absolutely. Their success paved the way. Soon after, you get the first actual professional league, the National Association. And then a few years later, in 1876, the stronger, more stable National League formed.
The National League? That's still around today.
It is. And then, in 1901, the American League was formed as a rival.
Ah, the AL and the NL, the two major leagues.
That's right. And almost immediately you had competition, rivalries, even early attempts at a championship series between the two leagues, like a precursor to the World Series.
So that's the path. Backyard game, amateur clubs, standardized rules, pro teams, and finally competing major leagues.
In a nutshell, yeah, it formalized everything.
Okay, let's shift gears. There's this period, roughly 1901 to 1919, called the dead ball era. What's
Okay.
that about? Sounds ominous.
It does, but it's actually named after the baseball itself.
It's a ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sources point out that baseballs back then were incredibly expensive, like over $100 in today's money for one ball.
Whoa. Okay, that's pricey.
So naturally, team owners didn't want to just toss them out when they got a little used.
So they reuse them a lot.
What- Often, the same ball would be used for the entire game.
The whole game. What did that do to the ball?
Think about it. It gets hit, thrown, bounces in the dirt, gets scuffed up, maybe gets wet, absorbs tobacco juice.
Yeah.
It would become dark, misshapen, soft, lumpy.
Yikes. Trying to hit that sounds almost impossible.
It was incredibly difficult. The ball didn't travel as far. It was harder for pitchers to grip and control consistently, but also harder for batters to see clearly and make solid contact.
So the pitchers must have dominated, right?
Totally. Pitchers were king in the dead ball era. You had legendary names like Cy Young, Walter Johnson. Games had really low scores, lots of bunts, stolen bases, trying to manufacture runs, one small step at a time.
Because hitting it hard and far was just less likely.
Much less likely.
Yeah.
So what finally killed the dead ball era? Did balls just get cheaper?
Sadly, no. It actually took a tragedy to force a major change.
Okay.
In 1920, a player named Ray Chapman, a shortstop for Cleveland, was hit in the head by a pitch.
Oh, no.
And he died from the injury. It's the only time a player has died directly from being hit by a pitch in an MLB game.
That's terrible. How did that connect to the ball?
Well, the account suggests the ball was very dirty, dark, and it was late in the afternoon. Chapman likely just didn't see it coming clearly enough.
Wow. That puts a different light on it.
It was a real shock to the system. After that, baseball made a crucial rule change. They mandated that umpires put fresh, clean, white baseballs into play whenever the current ball got dirty or scuffed.
Ah, so constantly replacing the ball.
Exactly. And around the same time, they also banned trick pitches, like the spitball, where pitchers would apply substances to the ball to make it move erratically.
Yeah.
Pitchers now had to rely purely on their own skill, spin, and velocity.
So cleaner balls, easier to see, easier to hit, and pitchers couldn't legally mess with them anymore.
Right. Suddenly, hitting became much, much easier. It really shifted the balance of power from the pitcher back towards the hitter.
Yeah.
Helped usher in the lively ball era.
A fundamental shift driven by a tragic event.
Now, around the same time, early 1900s, baseball's getting more popular, right? More fans?
Definitely. Attendance was growing, and that led teams to invest in building bigger, better places to play. Not just fields, but dedicated stadiums.
The classic ballparks we think of.
Yeah, places like Fenway Park in Boston, Wrigley Field in Chicago. They were built during this period. They became iconic homes for the teams and the fans. Temples of the game, almost.
But this era wasn't all positive growth. There was a pretty huge scandal, too.
Yes, the Black Sox scandal. 1919 World Series.
What happened there?
The accusation was that several players on the heavily favored Chicago White Sox conspired with gamblers to intentionally lose the World Series. Throw the game?
Lose on purpose in the World Series.
Exactly, for money. It was a massive blow to baseball's image. People questioned if the games were legitimate. It struck at the very integrity of the sport.
How did baseball respond to that? That's a crisis.
It was. The team owners realized they needed someone strong and independent to clean things up and protect the game. So they hired the first ever commissioner of baseball, a federal judge named Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Judge Landis, and he came down hard.
Very hard. His first major act was to ban the 8 White Sox players involved in the scandal from baseball for life, even though they were acquitted in court.
For life.
He said a very clear message. Gambling on games you're involved in or fixing games. That's the ultimate sin in baseball. Zero tolerance.
Setting a strong precedent. Now, we need to talk about something else happening during all this time, kind of a parallel story. The Negro Leagues.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. Because for a long, long time, there was this unfair reality in baseball.
An exclusion.
A terrible one. It wasn't an official written rule, but there was a gentleman's agreement among the major league owners and teams.
What did it do?
It effectively barred non-white players, particularly African Americans, from playing in the major leagues. Just shut them out completely for decades.
That's awful. Think of all the talent that was denied a chance.
It's incredible talent.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame level talent. And because they couldn't play in the majors, these amazing players formed their own leagues, the Negro Leagues.
So they created their own high-level baseball world.
They did. And stars were born there. Legends like Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Cool Papa Bell, players who were easily among the best in the world, period.
Now, the sources mentioned Jackie Robinson wasn't technically the very first Black player in professional baseball history. There was someone earlier.
Right. They mentioned Moses Fleetwood Walker, who played in a major league back in the 1880s, before that color line became rigidly enforced.
Okay.
But Jackie Robinson was the one who broke through in the modern era, after that long discriminatory ban had been in place for over half a century. That's the key distinction. His breaking the barrier was against that long-standing exclusion.
That makes sense. It highlights just how long that barrier stood.
Okay, so the dead ball era ends, the game gets cleaner balls, and then along comes a player who just transforms everything, Babe Ruth. Ah, the Babe. Yeah, he was a force of nature. Completely changed the game.
He started as a pitcher, right? A good one.
An excellent pitcher, one of the best left-handers around. But his hitting, wow. It was just on another level, especially for that time.
The home runs.
Exactly. He started hitting home runs in numbers nobody had ever seen before, or even imagined, really.
And the fans went nuts for it.
They loved it. The home run became the ultimate thrill in baseball. It was exciting, dramatic. And Ruth himself, he had this huge personality, larger than life.
And this was when radio was starting up too, right?
Yeah, mass media was emerging. Radio spread the news of his exploits across the country. He became more than just a baseball player. He became a national icon, a celebrity in a way athletes hadn't really been before.
The sources have that quote, "To say Babe Ruth is to say baseball."
That sums it up pretty well. He embodied the excitement, the power, the shift away from that low-scoring dead ball style. He made baseball feel bigger.
A true game changer. But then comes what many consider the most significant moment, maybe not just in baseball, but in American sports history.
Jackie Robinson, breaking the color barrier.
Yeah. This feels like a pivotal moment. Tell us about it.
So in 1947, Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, made the courageous decision to sign Jackie Robinson. He became the first African-American player in modern Major League Baseball.
Ending that horrible gentleman's agreement that had lasted for, what, over 50 years?
Exactly. And you just can't overstate the pressure he was under, the challenges he faced. They were immense.
The sources talk about the racism, the abuse.
Oh, constant abuse. From fans, from opposing players, even from some of his own teammates initially. Vile names, threats.
And the Jim Crow laws in some parts of the country too, right? He couldn't even stay in the same hotels or eat at the same restaurants as his white teammates on the road.
That's right. He endured all of that with incredible dignity and restraint. Rickey had made him promise not to retaliate, to just let his play do the talking.
The strength that must have taken.
Unimaginable. And he wasn't just enduring it, he was an outstanding player. Rookie of the Year, an MVP later on. He proved he belonged on talent alone while carrying this enormous burden.
And his impact went way beyond the baseball field, didn't it?
Absolutely. His success and his courage were a huge inspiration. It helped pave the way for integration in other sports, and it was a significant moment in the larger civil rights movement in America. It showed people what was possible.
Such a powerful legacy. And baseball gave him a unique honor later on, right?
Yes. In 1997, on the 50th anniversary of his debut, Major League Baseball retired his number, 42.
For the Dodgers?
No, for all teams, across the entire league. No player can wear number 42 anymore, except on Jackie Robinson Day each year when everyone wears it. He's the only player in history to receive that universal honor.
A fitting tribute. Okay, so after World War II and with integration starting, baseball just keeps growing.
Yeah, the post-war era saw another big boom in popularity.
And the leagues themselves started getting bigger.
Right. They began expanding. adding new teams, moving into new cities, especially out west, spreading the game's footprint across the continent.
And with more teams, they had to change the structure for the playoffs, right? It wasn't just the AL winner versus the NL winner anymore.
Correct. They eventually created divisions within each league. Then you had playoff series to determine the division winners, and then league championship series to determine who went to the World Series.
More layers to the postseason.
Exactly. And even later, they introduced the wild card, giving teams that didn't win their division a chance to make the playoffs too. More teams involved, more postseason excitement.
What about making the games themselves more accessible? We talked about stadiums, but what about when people could watch?
A huge change there was night baseball.
Playing under lights.
Yeah. The first official MLB night game was actually back in 1935. The Cincinnati Reds hosted it. But it took a while to catch on everywhere.
Why was that such a big deal?
Because it meant people could go to games after work. Before lights, games were mostly played during the day, when most people were working. Night games opened it up to a much wider audience, boosted attendance, brought in more money. By the 60s, most games were played at night.
Changed the whole rhythm of being a fan.
Completely. And then, the other huge change in accessibility. Television. Starting in the 1950s, games began being broadcast into people's living rooms. Suddenly, you didn't have to be at the ballpark or even listen on the radio. You could see the game from anywhere in the country.
That must have been revolutionary.
Totally. And then cable TV came along later, offering even more games, regional sports networks, focusing just on one team. It just exploded the amount of baseball people could watch.
So the game's reach just kept expanding. Did the look change too, like the uniforms?
Oh yeah, uniforms have had quite an evolution. You mentioned the early days, wool pants, maybe straw hats.
Right.
They experimented with different things. Briefly, some teams tried having different colored caps or socks for different positions, but that didn't stick. Then came the standard of usually white uniforms at home and gray uniforms on the road.
That's still pretty common.
It is, but now you also see teams with multiple alternate jerseys, bright colors, throwback uniforms celebrating past eras. It's much more varied.
And the sources mentioned something weird about umpire uniforms.
Yeah, a brief kind of infamous moment where umpires actually wore advertising patches for FTX for a bit. That didn't last long, but it shows how things change.
Okay, another big rule change, one that really split the leagues for a long time. The designated hitter. The DH.
Right. This was a major innovation introduced by the American League only back in 1973.
So what was the rule?
Simple idea. The pitcher, who is usually not a very good hitter, wouldn't have to bat anymore. Instead, a designated hitter, someone who only hits and doesn't play a position in the field, would hit in the pitcher's spot in the lineup.
So replacing a weak hitter with potentially a very strong one.
Exactly. The idea was to boost offense, make the game more exciting, proponents argued.
And the National League didn't adopt it.
Nope. The NL stuck with tradition for decades. Pitchers continued to hit in the National League. It created this fundamental strategic difference between the two leagues. Managers had to think differently about substitutions, double switches, pinch hitters.
Interesting. So AL games tended to have more offense, potentially?
Often, yeah. That was the design. It was a major point of debate between the leagues for almost 50 years until the NL finally adopted the DH2 very recently.
Okay, bring us more towards the modern game. It hasn't all been smooth sailing, right? There have been conflicts and challenges.
Definitely. As players' salaries grew and players realized their value, they formed a very strong players' union, the MLBPA.
And that led to clashes with the owners.
Yes, over contracts, free agency, revenue sharing, things like that. Sometimes these disputes led to work stoppages, strikes by the players, or lockouts by the owners.
The most famous being?
Probably the 1994-95 strike. It was so bitter it actually led to the cancellation of the World Series in 1994, a huge blow to the game at the time.
Wow. And we talked about the Black Sox gambling scandal way back. Did anything like that happen again?
Well, there was another major gambling-related incident. The sources highlight the case of Pete Rose.
Pete Rose, the all-time hits leader.
The very same. In 1989, after an investigation, he agreed to a lifetime ban from baseball.
Why?
For betting on baseball games, including games involving his own team, while he was the manager of the Cincinnati Reds.
Betting on your own team's games.
Even if he says he only bet on them to win, it's still seen as compromising the integrity of the game. It echoed that strong stance taken by Judge Landis way back with the Black Sox. Gambling by participants is the line you just don't cross.
Okay, now, a really difficult and controversial era, the steroid era, late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, this is a complex one. What happened was suddenly home run numbers just exploded. Players were hitting balls farther more often, records were being shattered.
And people started asking why.
Right. And sources indicate, and many players later admitted or were caught, that the use of performance-enhancing drugs like anabolic steroids and human growth hormone was widespread.
Why were players using them?
To get stronger, hit the ball harder, recover from injuries faster, gain an edge.
And who are some of the big names associated with this era, according to the sources?
The sources mention players like Barry Bonds, who broke the all-time home run record, Mark McGwire, and Sammy Sosa, who had that famous home run chase in '98. McGwire later admitted using, Roger Clemens, the pitcher, Alex Rodriguez, who also admitted using. Many high-profile stars were implicated or admitted use.
How did baseball respond? Did they test for this stuff?
Initially, testing was weak or non-existent. But eventually, facing public pressure, media scrutiny, and even congressional hearings, MLB and the Players Union gradually implemented stricter drug testing policies with significant penalties for violations. It was an evolution over several years, really starting in the mid-2000s.
Were there health concerns too? The sources mentioned some specific instances.
Yes, tragically. The sources note the death of Orioles pitcher Steve Bessler in 2003 was linked to the stimulant ephedra. And Ken Caminiti, a former MVP who admitted steroid use, died young, with heart problems cited as a contributing factor, although other substance abuse was also involved. It highlighted the potential dangers.
So this era, it cast a shadow over records, legacies.
It really did. It forced a difficult conversation about cheating, health risks, and the integrity of the game's statistics. And some argue it influenced how the game is played even today, maybe contributing to the rise of strikeouts as pitchers threw harder and hitters swung for the fences more.
A really challenging chapter. Moving on to another major modern shift. Data. Analytics. Moneyball.
Ah, yes. This has completely changed how teams operate.
So what is it, basically?
It's about using advanced statistics, often called sabermetrics, and data analysis to make smarter decisions. Instead of just relying on traditional scouting, like how a player looks, teams started digging deep into numbers to find undervalued players or identify the most effective strategies.
And the book and movie Moneyball made this famous, right? About the Oakland A's.
Exactly. It showed how a team with a small budget could compete by using data cleverly. And now, every team uses analytics extensively.
And the technology keeps advancing.
Oh, incredibly. Now you have systems like StatCast in every ballpark. It uses cameras and radar to track everything: pit speed, spin rate, exit velocity off a bat, launch angle, fielder positioning, running speed. Incredible amounts of data.
And teams use all that data for
Everything. Player evaluation, deciding where to position fielders for each batter, the defensive shifts you see, developing pitching strategies, optimizing lineups. It's a data revolution. A huge contrast to how decisions were made for most of baseball history.
Seems like a whole different language almost.
It kind of is. Before we wrap up, a couple more quick things. Spring training, what's the point of that?
It's basically preseason. Teams go to warm weather locations, usually Arizona or Florida, for about 6 weeks before the regular season starts. To do what? Just practice.
Practice? Yes. Get players back into game shape after the offseason. But also for managers to evaluate players, especially young prospects, trying to make the team, figure out roster spots, install plays, and just get ready for the long season ahead. It's a mix of workouts, exhibition games, and decision-making.
Got it. And finally, baseball isn't just America's pastime anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's a truly global game now, hugely popular in many other countries.
Like where?
Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Asia.
Yeah.
Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and Latin America. These countries produce tons of major league talent.
And MLB embraces that international aspect.
Increasingly, yes. They
Yeah.
play some regular season games overseas now. And they have events like the World Baseball Classic, which is like a World Cup for baseball, bringing national teams from all over the globe together to compete. It showcases the global talent.
So, looking back at everything we've talked about, it's kind of amazing.
It really is. You
Yeah.
go from guys playing baseball near a meeting house worried about windows to standardized rules, professional leagues, iconic stadiums, devastating scandals, heroes like Ruth and Robinson who changed society, technological revolutions like night games and TV.
The controversies of the steroid era, the data explosion with Moneyball and StatCast, and now a truly global game.
It's been constant change, constant evolution. The game adapts, responds to challenges, incorporates new ideas and technologies.
It really underscores that baseball isn't some unchanging relic. It's alive, it's dynamic, it keeps morphing.
Absolutely. Which leads to a pretty interesting thought, doesn't it?
Yeah. Thinking about all those twists and turns, all the ways the game has been reshaped already, it makes you wonder, given everything we've seen, the rules changing, the equipment, the strategy, the technology, the very players themselves, what do you think is the next big thing? What's the next major change waiting around the corner that could fundamentally reshape baseball for the next generation?
What part of the game is maybe ripe for its own aha moment, its own big innovation? It's definitely something to think about.
It is indeed. Well, this has been fascinating, really tracing that whole arc.
Thanks for diving deep into baseball's amazing history with us today.